Hi, everybody. I hope everyone here is doing well. Thank you for joining me this lovely afternoon, this lovely ringing afternoon. I'm really excited to talk today about my analysis on diet and wellness culture within the context of my learning in this faculty of Land and Food Systems. And so the reason why I wanted to do a workshop on diet and wellness culture is because I believe all of us to some extent has experienced the impact of diet and wellness culture, whether it's really significant or minor. We're constantly being bombarded with these images and ideals, and I really think that it's not a topic that's addressed enough in society. Currently, I'm a dietetics student, and I am really passionate about building positive eating relationships and positive relationships with food. And this is what I hope to incorporate into my practice in about 2 years as a registered dietitian. So in general, I've really learned to critically evaluate the world around me through my perspectives and through my learnings in Land and Food Systems. And so I'm really excited to share my observations with you today. Lastly, I also want to recognize that this may be a triggering topic for some individuals, and I do want to be upfront that we will be talking about topics like diet and disordered eating content. I'll also use images and talk about what can be perceived as controversial topics revolving around diet and wellness culture. I do have Christine and Bonita here, who are both from Student Services, as I mentioned earlier. They will be here to moderate the chat if you have any concerns or comments or feedback or anything. And at the very end of the presentation, for anyone interested in learning more, I will have a list of resources. So let's dive into it. So first, the introduction. Welcome to my workshop again. So before anything else, I want to introduce myself as I'll be presenting and facilitating the workshop. So I'm Lucy. I'm an LFS student ambassador. I also work for Student Services, but I'm a work-learn student. And this means that I basically work really part-time, like 10 hours max per week. And this really allows me to focus on my studies while also getting some great work experience. I'm in my 4th year of dietetics, but I did transfer from the Faculty of Science at UBC. And so it's been a long journey for me. Some of my top interests include crocheting. So I have a show and tell here. So I have little crochet nigiris. This is salmon. This is tamago, so egg and tuna. I usually always have shrimp on me as well, but I recently gave that away. So I don't have shrimp to show you today. I'm also really passionate about nutrition education, which is why I'm studying dietetics as my dream career. And lastly, I am really interested in critically evaluating diet culture, which is why I'm doing this workshop today. So the next thing I want to talk about is this land acknowledgement. And this is something that oftentimes you will find at UBC presentations. UBC's Vancouver campus is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. The Faculty of Land and Food Systems is committed to working with Indigenous communities and students alike in our curriculum and research. And so personally to me, that I'm really grateful to be able to study, work, and play on this land that has been taken care of for thousands of years before me. I'm currently in East Vancouver, and I learned what land this is from the link at the bottom right here. So if you can find it out where you're tuning in from for nativeland.ca. And so when I looked that up in East Vancouver, I was able to find that I'm on the territory of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, Solo, Chamanis, and Musqueam people. It's just really important in general to acknowledge what this land means to you and how we can all be a part of this story in a respectful way in the present and in the future. Okay, so now it's time to delve into the content of the workshop. So I want to address unrealistic body image. It's really, you can find it everywhere in our world. It's found with brands, it's found with social media influencers and mass social media. And so before I go into this, I want to mention one more time that we will be talking about and going over images that may be triggering to you. And so if that's the case, please feel free to minimize the screen so that you can still hear me, but you don't actually have to look at anything that I'm showing you. But first, before we actually look at any images, I did want to do a brainstorm activity again. And so as I mentioned, I'll be asking you to annotate a lot. And today, I'm hoping that we can brainstorm what product or industry uses body image in their marketing materials. And so oftentimes you will see a product or like an entire industry, like the sports industry maybe, that will use unrealistic body images in their marketing that really has nothing to do with the product or the industry itself. And so I gave you the sports industry. Is there anything else that you can think of? Yeah. So you can go ahead and annotate the screen. I really want to emphasize that it is completely anonymous. Sodas like Coke? Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. All of them. Fashion industry, cars, clothing, makeup. 100% agree. Cars is a big one too, but so is everything else on the screen here. And yeah, I would have to agree. It is like almost every single industry I can think of. Supplements, absolutely. Perfume and cologne. Yeah, that's a big one. All right. I'll give this maybe like 5 more seconds to get any last thoughts in. I see Deo. Is that referring to deodorant? If so, I totally agree, and I know exactly what you're talking about. If not, please feel free to correct me. I see restaurant. True, very true. Yeah, so all of these most certainly do use unrealistic body images in their marketing materials. And strangely enough, oftentimes it has nothing to do with body image. So it's just really strange. And I think it's a really interesting way to show how bombarded we are with these images. I also see vacation homes like Airbnb. You know, that's a really good point. Like every single part of our lives, we see these images. So thank you all for participating in that. I'm going to clear my screen now and move on to the next slide. So we just talked about brands, and we also talked about products and industry, but we're also seeing it a lot with really popular social media influencers. You can see Kylie Jenner here, The Rock, Kim Kardashian. All of these influencers have almost 200 million followers. And so you can just see, just by the sheer number of followers, how many people are exposed to their images on the daily basis. So yeah, I want to talk about social media influences there. And then I also want to talk about mass social media. So it's not just like certain people who are influencing everyone, but everyone's influencing everyone. So you can see with mass social media here, I looked up the hashtags. So on the left here, these are hashtags that I looked up on Instagram. I looked up the hashtag diet, and you can see that they're on the left, top left, and you can see that there are almost 70 million posts about diet. And I also looked up the term wellness. And, you know, I really want to talk about wellness, and I will talk about wellness a little bit more. But in general, wellness can be really great. It can be about mental health. It can be about meditation. It can be about things that are really great for us. But at the same time, sometimes diet will pretend to be a good thing by masking itself as a wellness product instead. So oftentimes wellness can be a mask for diet culture. So that's why I looked up wellness. And you can see here that there's over 40 million posts for wellness as well. In comparison, just to show you like how big this is, I looked up the hashtag school, and there is like the majority of people have been in school or are familiar with school, and there's only 45 million posts. So you can see that diet and wellness are almost equivalent or more than school. I also looked up the hashtag diet and wellness on TikTok, which is an up and coming app that a lot of people are using lately. And you can see that the hashtag diet has over 3 billion views, which is quite a lot. And then you can see TikTok wellness has 4.7 billion views. So I just wanted to really emphasize that diet and wellness culture is something that we're all constantly exposed to on social media as well as brands. So now I wanted to do a poll, and so we're going to also do the annotation here. So you can see the stamp function with annotation. You can use the check mark, you can use the heart, the star, the question mark, whatever you want, besides the letter that relates most to you. And so the poll is, how much time do you spend on social media? And this could be YouTube, Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, TikTok, but just in general, how much time do you spend per day? And so A is none, B is 0 to 1 hours, C is 1 to 2 hours, and D is 2+ hours. right, yeah, I'll give this maybe a couple more seconds here, but the trends that I'm seeing is a lot of C and D, so a lot on the higher end of things. And I wanted to compare this actually to, thank you for participating, to the national average or the worldwide average. And that is actually 144 minutes per day, which is 2 hours and 24 minutes. If I can do mental math quickly. But yeah, so you can kind of see that on average, the world is doing 2 hours or more, so D or more. And I actually did the same poll on the UBC LFS Instagram last week. And you can see that, again, the majority of people did choose 2+ hours per day. And I think that this poll and the result that we just had and the worldwide result is really says a lot, especially because it can have a huge influence on you. And so I will talk about a study on the influence that being on social media can have on the way you perceive yourself. But I also wanted to mention that because of COVID and because a lot of us are on lockdown right now, oftentimes the only thing we have to do is go on social media. And so this can have a big effect on ourselves and the way we perceive ourselves. And so this is the study that I'm talking about. This is a study done in 2019 in the University of South Wales. And the title of the study is, Can Time Spent on Social Media Affect Thin Ideal Internalization, Objectified Body Consciousness, and Exercise Motivation in Women? So first, let's just break down what this title means. It's a lot of big words. So first of all, social media was defined as Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. Although now, I'm not sure how many people in this room use Pinterest, but I know TikTok is something that's used a lot. It wasn't part of social media in the study, but I'm sure that maybe it can be extrapolated to TikTok as well. And when the study, yeah, that's right. And then moving on to thin ideal internalization. So this is defined as the extent to which someone buys into these socially defined ideals of attractiveness, and then after they buy into this, they engage in behaviors to match this ideal. That's called thin ideal internalization. And then objectified body consciousness was defined by the study as a preoccupation, so kind of like an obsession almost, with how your body or how one's body appears to others. And so the last one here, exercise motivation, I will not be going into, but this is quite an easy read. So if you'd like to look at the study afterwards, I highly encourage you to look at it. But looking at the results of the study here, you can see on both sides of the graph, there's thin ideal internalization, and then there's objectified body consciousness. Right at 1.5 hours, you can see that thin ideal internalization is through the roof. It's at its peak. After 1.5 hours for objectified body consciousness on social media, you can see that that's already at its peak. And so if you go back to the results that we had just now, where the majority was 1 to 2 hours or 2 hours and more, you can see that there is a huge effect on the way that we see our bodies, the way we engage in behaviors, and the way that we perceive our bodies in comparison to other people around us. This study was done on 100 UK female students, so I want to acknowledge that there needs to be a lot more research on other genders as well, but I still think that the results are significant. So I talked about a lot of negative things just now, so I want to bring it back to a positive and brainstorm together. What are some healthy social media behaviors you can engage in? I talked a lot about how social media can affect you, but in what ways can you prevent this effect on yourself? So for example, maybe take a social media break for a week. That's one way of doing it. Anyway, anything else that you can think of, go ahead and annotate the screen. I'll give it maybe a minute.
All right, so I see one that says take breaks. I just wanted to note that my earbuds ran out of battery, so I will be speaking on the speaker here. So I hope I sound as clear as I did with the earbuds. So I see take breaks. Some other ways does include kind of reflecting on how many photos it might have taken to actually post the photo, or maybe what angles were used, what lighting was used, whether there was any editing involved. So I know this was a bit of a hard question, so we'll move on to the next one here. Um, so I talked about social media and I talked about brand and ideal body images, but I wanted to talk about how this often changes all the time. So there is really no consistent ideal body image. Um, and this one, I really like this slide because it just shows over the span of centuries how different it can be. And so you see the Venus of Willendorf here at 25,000 BC, see Marilyn Monroe at 1954, and then you see the Fairy Queen at 1590. And what do all of these images have in common? They're all depicting women of larger body size. And also they're all different. So I think that just goes to show how different our ideal body image can change. And another thing that I wanted to mention is that not only can it change over the centuries, but can most definitely change over decades. So you can see every single decade how different these ideal body images look like. And in reality, if we're living like say 80 years and there's these body images that we want to try and achieve with the thin ideal internalization, it's so unrealistic. It's just not achievable. And so it's the societal pressure is just so strong for everyone. And I also wanted to mention that this is not just for females, but also for males. And that's why I also included this image as well. And so the overall message that I wanted to share is that beauty is really subjective and there is no perfect body. And this is why I selected the picture on the left here. So this was in response to a brand campaign that actually had the term perfect body with a bunch of typical ideal body images and women in lingerie. And so this was the response, and I really love the response. And on the left here, or on the right here, I think it's a really great parallel, but kind of the male version of how beauty is subjective and how there is no ideal body. So now I want to ask a question. I talked a lot about people not feeling like they match the ideal body image or thin ideal internalization. And so I want to ask the crowd, who benefits from this? Who benefits from making people feel bad about their bodies? Yeah, so I see the beauty industry, absolutely. And I do see gyms as well. That's a really good one. Yeah. Food product companies. Yeah, 100%. Anything else that comes to mind? So I see weight loss companies, I see plastic surgery clinics. Yeah, absolutely. All of these are 100% correct. And yeah, they do actually benefit from people feeling bad about their bodies and making people want to change their bodies. So I'm going to clear the annotation screen here. Thank you for participating in that. And I think one term that really encompasses what all of you just said is the diet and wellness industry. So now I want to actually define what I mean by that. And I have here as a little note that the wellness industry often masquerades itself as something that's not a diet, but in reality, it is often diet culture. And that's what I was mentioning earlier when I was talking about hashtags. So what is diet culture? I've said it like 10 times just now. And so here's the definition. A system of beliefs that fitness equals health and moral virtue. It promotes weight loss, so you feel the need to spend a massive amount of time, energy, and money trying to shrink your body. And this is a quote by Christy Harrison here, and she's a registered dietitian. I actually really love her work, and so I actually own her book, which is Anti-Diet, and it was made by Christy Harrison. And so, yeah, I think that this is a really great definition of diet culture. And I wanted to show you visually and with real life examples of how both diet and wellness can be seen in your everyday lives. You don't have to be on social media either to see it. You can see it at the grocery store, just when you're trying to buy food. You can see clean eating here. This is something that I like to call wellness culture, as it's not necessarily a diet, but it still is kind of like a diet. But yeah, so that's clean eating. Then you have coconut oil, shakes and nutrition bars, low carb foods, low fat foods, detox and cleanses, diet and soft drinks, and then gluten-free for those who are not intolerant. And the one thing that all of these do have in common is that they do promote well-being or weight loss. If there's anything else you can think of, I really encourage you to put your thoughts in the Zoom chat as well. So these are some statistics about the diet industry that I really wanted to go into. And I wanted to mention that a lot of them do come from the States, but because a lot of consumer trends in Canada are similar to consumer trends in the States, I think that it is still pretty relevant to talk about. And so the first fact here is that the US diet industry is actually worth $72 billion. And that is how many people are actually buying these diet and wellness products. Going into the next fact here, the growth of the gluten-free industry from 2004 to 2018 was 1.5 billion. And when I say the growth of the gluten-free industry, I really want to emphasize that gluten-free is important for those who are intolerant or for those who are allergic. But for those who are not, the industry has actually marketed itself as almost like a weight loss or a diet or a wellness product. And so you can see the explosion of growth just through its marketing campaigns. And then in the end here, 95 million active dieters in the US. I think this is a really significant number because if you look at America, there's around 400 people, probably or 400 million people, probably a little bit less than that. And so 95 million active dieters is about a quarter of the entire population of America that's actively on a diet. And I just thought that these facts were really shocking and worthwhile to share. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is, are diets effective? If they're so profitable and if so many people are actively dieting, then is there a reason for this? And the answer to that is no, definitely not, at least with the research that we have at the moment and with specific diets that are meant to sustain weight loss. So the rest of the definition here that Christy Harrison has created is diet culture is this: even though the research is very clear that almost no one can sustain intentional weight loss for more than a few years. And I'd like to go into a study actually talking about this a little bit more. This was a study done by some doctors in Finland, but I do want to start off with a caveat that I don't exactly appreciate the title, but I still believe that the study results are significant and impactful. So this was a study done in 2012, and it includes both males and females, and it was done on about 4,000 twins. The weight and height were measured at 16, 18, and 25 years old, and then they also asked each individual how many times between these ages did they intentionally try to lose 5 kilograms of weight or more. And this was called an intentional weight loss episode, and that's how they named it in the study. And so the introduction of the study actually just says that it's really well established in research that weight control efforts lead or predict future weight gain. And so the purpose of the study was to tease out and differentiate what actually led to that weight gain and why that was a correlation that existed. And so they wanted to know whether it was genetics causing it. So say genetics was leading to weight gain that made people want to diet more, or whether it was actually the diet itself that was causing the weight gain. And so in order to figure out that relationship and the difference, that's why they used twins, because they're identical and their genetics were the same. So really the only difference was the diet. The results of the study actually did find that frequent and intentional weight loss episodes seem to predict small and subsequent weight gain compared to their non-dieting twins. And so, in other words, yes, actually, frequent weight loss intentional episodes did seem to predict small weight gain. And so, I wanted to delve into that a little bit more about why are some theories about why that's the case, and this is actually called rebound weight gain, where someone gains weight lost from dieting. And there are two theories that I really wanted to highlight from the study. The first one was that restrictive dieting suppresses the metabolism. So when you're suppressing your body from all this food, it goes into starvation mode. Evolutionarily, this makes a lot of sense. But even when the diet is over, the body is actually still in this metabolic state of starvation mode, and so the food that the body gets is still going to hold on to it as if it was in starvation mode. And the second theory that this study talked about was restrictive dieting may lead to a preoccupation with food and trigger overeating. And this is a concept that I've not only seen in this study, but something that I've seen throughout some of my classes at UBC. And I actually made an infographic based on it. And I didn't create the concept, but I still thought that it was a really interesting concept. So I created the infographic here. You can see on the bottom left that it really starts with a restriction. So the restrictive dieting. Say, for example, if you're restricting chocolate cake, then eventually, because it's this forbidden food object that you've restricted from yourself, eventually you might end up craving it. And when someone craves this food that they've restricted for so long, they may end up overeating it. And then this tends to lead to guilt, which tends to lead to restriction, and then more craving and more overeating and more guilt. And it's really quite the cycle there. So this is a rhetorical question. You don't have to annotate the screen here, but I wanted to pose the question again. Who benefits from people having rebound weight gain? Again, the diet and wellness industry. So if we're going back to the thought process of why the diet industry is so profitable, $72 billion, it's because people don't actually permanently sustain their intentional weight loss. And this will oftentimes lead to weight gain back, which will lead to maybe trying a different diet product, weight gain back, trying a different diet product. And so this is kind of the whole purpose of the diet and wellness industries, or not the purpose, but more like the explanation for the profits. So now I want to go more about what I've learned in my nutrition across the lifespan class with some self-reflections. So this is a faculty spotlight of Dr. Candace Rideout. I've taken one class with her, which is FNH 371, and this is where I really started to learn about this topic. And it's called Nutrition Over the Lifespan, and I think she did such an excellent job teaching it. But I also want to have the caveat that the information that I'm about to share with you, she shared with the class after there has been an established trust between a small group of students who are on a learning journey together. And what she has taught in class is very different from this one-off workshop that I'm providing to you today. So this is the poll that she gave in class, and I want to remind you that it's completely anonymous, so please feel free to be honest. So on a scale of 1 to 5, if you could just annotate beside where you feel that you believe in, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you think that people need to be thin to be happy and successful? So 1 being not true, and then 5 being very true. Like, where do you think you stay in that spectrum there? All right, yeah, I'll give a couple more seconds there, but I'm seeing a general trend that's going more towards like B and A. So, you know, maybe a little bit true or maybe not true at all. And that's a really fair statement because although it really shouldn't be the case, there is weight stigma in this world. And so maybe that's why it's not exactly why it's not exactly not true at all. So I will clear this screen here. Thank you for participating. And then the next question she posed to us was actually a little bit different. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you think that you personally need to be thin to be happy and successful. And again, please be honest, this is completely anonymous, but when she asked us the question, it really got me thinking. But anyway, I will leave about maybe 30 seconds for this annotation. Yeah, okay, while the last few are coming in there, I'm seeing more of a general trend that's being pushed towards a little bit more of the, yeah, that is a little bit more true than the previous statement. And thank you for participating in that activity. This is the results of the poll in class, and actually we totally had a very similar result there. When we were asked about how much do we think that people in general need to be thin and happy to be successful, a lot of us were thinking, you know what, like, not really. But then when it came to ourselves, you can kind of see how different we voted. And so I'm bringing this up because it had such an impact on me, a long-lasting impact. I took the class maybe like 8 months ago at this point. Yeah, and it really made me reflect. And she actually asked us to reflect on why this is the case. And so I want to ask you the same questions. For those of you who chose differently, why is it different? Why have we internalized this body image expectation? And so I think that's where the beginning of my presentation came in a lot. It's because it's so prevalent. Like everywhere we look, we're almost told how to look. So I really love this poll. And now I want to move it on a more positive note about what you can personally do to avoid the pitfalls of diet culture. So I bombarded you with all this information. What now? So this is a slide from the same class, FNH 371, Nutrition Over the Lifespan. And you can see right here on the graph, it says media pressure. The way to intervene with media pressure is media literacy. So kind of finding ways to change the way you view the images around you, kind of looking at it as a more mindful consumer. Again, with all those things that we brainstormed earlier in the workshop, kind of thinking of how many pictures or how many photos it must have taken to get that, maybe like thinking about different angles, thinking about lighting, thinking about editing or anything like that. So this is a way for sure to kind of intervene with that media pressure. Another thing that I learned in my nutrition counseling class is where you can kind of break that cycle of diet culture. And so I mentioned that restriction is often what may lead to that preoccupation with food and then the craving and the overeating and the guilt. And so from the beginning, if you tend not to, or if you try a little bit less to restrict yourself and then, like, for example, with a chocolate cake, say you allow yourself to have a slice of chocolate cake, then oftentimes your body is not going to have that urge where you want that chocolate cake so badly. And oftentimes, because you've given yourself that chocolate cake without any guilt or without feeling bad about it, then oftentimes you won't feel the need to overeat, and then there will be no guilt associated with it. And so this is oftentimes where we like to break the cycle, although what I'm saying is a lot easier said than done. And so it's an ongoing progress. So some other things that I wanted to mention is intuitive eating and mindful eating. This is something that's also recommended in the Canadian Food Guide of 2019. And this is basically referring to listening to your body. If you're hungry, go ahead and eat. But if you're not hungry, then maybe don't force yourself to eat. And then seeking support is also something that's really important. If you feel like you would like to seek support, there are a lot of resources out there. Looking Glass is something that I have personally volunteered for, and Looking Glass is an eating disorder support group. Yeah. And then doing more investigative work and learning more. If this is a topic that really interested you, I highly recommend maybe reading this book. I love this book. It really did change my worldview, and it was written by a registered dietitian, and she has some really interesting insight on diet culture as well. Here are some more support. So we have the National Eating Disorder Information Center, and then we have the Kelty Mental Health, which is a part of the BC Children's Hospital, but they can connect you to different locations and centers. So last annotation activity for the day. What learning has surprised you today? I'll give maybe like 30 seconds for this. So I see how many posts there are about diet and wellness. That is true. I think there was like on Instagram over 70 million posts about diet. I see a star behind that. True. The restriction cycle. Yeah, so that was something I learned in class and also something that resonated with me for a really long time afterwards. How much money the wellness culture and industry generates. Yeah, absolutely. 72 billion. And this is on America alone. Like, this is not just everywhere in the world, too. So I see how, I'll wait for that one. And then we can move on. But yeah, everything here totally resonates with me. How many influencers have? Oh, how many followers? I totally read that wrong. How many followers influencers have? Yeah, 200 million. It's quite a lot. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to clear the screen here. Thank you all for participating in all of these annotation activities. You have been such a wonderful audience today. And now I just want to talk about UBC, LFS, land and food systems in general. So how do you know that you want to be a part of land and food systems? So first, we recommend that you do your research on these websites. So we have landfood.ubc.ca, or we have u.ubc.ca, so you.ubc.ca. Explore all the different options. So you might be interested in LFS. If you are, then look into the different degree programs there too. And so that has to do with number 2, choose the degree you want to study based on your interests. Also, number 3, when you're picking out your specific degrees that you're interested in, make sure you know the admission requirements and make sure you have them in high school or in post-secondary. And then 4, attend UBC and LFS specific online workshops, events, and presentations. And so all of you are here today, so you're already completing step 4, so awesome. And this is the last screen here, which is the stay in touch screen. If you want to contact an academic advisor, you can email the top here, which is students@landfood.ubc.ca. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Instagram has a lot of really fun events. There's a lot of really fun graphics, and like myself and the other ambassador tend to do a lot of cooking, demos, and like interactive quizzes on the story. And you can also visit the landfood.ubc.ca website, which will have a lot more information as well. So that is the end of the presentation. So thank you all again for being such a wonderful and attentive audience. I'm going to stop recording here and open the floor for any questions that you may have.